Hello and welcome to the Afghanistan in 1918 to Today discussion panel. Here we have Ms. Paulina Figueroa, Ms. Sofia Gonzalez, Ms. Ruth Avila, and Ms. Dania Sanchez. Welcome to the panel, ladies.
Thank you, we're glad you invited us.
Could you please make a summary of the conflict?
Okay, so first of all, if you want to understand really what is going on, I will tell you like 6 principal events of this. So let's place us in the year 1980. This was when Babrak Karmal was the leader of Afghanistan and was supported by the Soviet troops. But the opposition intensifies with many Mujahideen groups fighting Soviet forces. And it's important to know that USA, Iran, China and Saudi Arabia were supplying money and arms to the Mujahideen. The other fact could be in the year of 1988. In September, it was like Osama bin Laden and 50 other Islamists formed a group, which is known as Al-Qaeda. And to continue their holy war, this means like go against everyone that is just not supporting their ideal of an Islamic state. And they started focusing in America because they see it as a main opponent, and it was like our force around the world. So, and then another one could be in 1998, US President Clinton orders to launch missiles at suspected bases of militant Osama bin Laden, accusing of bombing US embassies in Africa. But this has like a really huge consequence. Is an event that is known as a tragedy for all humanity, and it's placed in the year 2001. This is when, in October, US led bombs to Afghanistan as a response. They attacked it on September 11, destroying the Twin Towers and lives of thousands of people. So, in 2015, the Islamic State group emerged in eastern Afghanistan and within a few months captures a large swath of Taliban-controlled areas in Nangarhar province. And well, in the years of like today, in present, there has been a rise of Islamic activities, and each year is getting bigger and bigger. Like the violence is getting worse, and it's all around the world.
The first question is for Ms. Paulina Figueroa. Which were the main actors of this conflict?
There are 2 groups we're going to talk about right now. The first one is Taliban. It's an Islamic group that ruled in this nation from 1996 to 2001. They were fighters who resist Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. With the backing of the US CIA and its Pakistani counterpart, the ISI, later they were joined by younger students, Pashtuns. In fact, the name Taliban is Pashto for students. By the time they were more predominant ethnic group in Taliban. They later tried to pacify southern cities, but by 1996 they seized Kabul, which was viewed as a non-Pashtun or anti-Pashtun. Taliban practically controlled 90% of all the country. Then in 1998, the UN come and defend the rights for women. To end the Taliban abusive treatment of them, Taliban rule formed the Northern Alliance, which assists US-led forces in routing the Taliban after 9/11. Some experts suspect the Pakistani security establishment continues to provide Taliban's militias sanctuary in the country's western tribal areas in an effort to counter India's influence in Afghanistan. The Taliban post-2001 resurgence has partially been financed by narcotics production and trafficking. In some outlying districts, Afghan forces and local insurgents have reached informal ceasefires that effectively cede a degree of authority to the Taliban. So the UN report in 2014 that the Taliban maintain outright control of the districts. This means that in 3,073 nationwide, but the insurgency reach extends much further. Afghan security forces judged in late 2013 that some 40% of districts had raised or high threat level. The other group we're going to talk about, or it's a country actually, it's US. The US now has a strong relationship with Afghanistan. because they both are in fighting and combating the terrorism, principally to eliminate the Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. So since 1990, U.S. position is that they always want to strengthen Afghanistan capabilities, and today they are still helping and investing in Afghanistan to improve security, government, economy, and institutions. Then they were created the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, and the United States of America signed in May 2012. It was also created the Bilateral Security Agreement, which was signed in September 2014, and in July 2012 it was signed that President Obama designated Afghanistan a major non-NATO ally.
So talking about key actors, how is Osama bin Laden important, and when did he turn against the US?
Throughout this whole conflict, there have been different actors involved. When it comes to Afghanistan, most of the actors are almost always Muslim extremists. The best example we have of this is Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was a Muslim from one of Saudi Arabia's wealthiest families. He used his wealth to help the Afghan resistance. One curious thing is that Osama worked with the United States before turning against them. The United States supported him and the Afghans against the Soviets after World War II, until Osama convinced himself they could beat other superpowers, including the US. After that, and until 9/11, he organized many attacks in different countries to kill Americans. He killed approximately 300 people, most of them Americans, during the 1990s in terrorist attacks in different countries. He founded Al-Qaeda to recruit Muslims and send money and arms to Afghanistan. When the Afghan fighters succeeded in defeating the Soviet Union, he became convinced that superpowers could be beaten. He believed that Western ideas had contaminated Islamic societies. He was outraged when Saudi Arabia led American troops on their soil. He dedicated himself to driving Westerners out of Muslim countries. He directed one of the most destructive acts of terrorism in history. On September 2001, terrorists hijacked 4 commercial planes in different cities of the United States and flew them directly into the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon. Bin Laden was killed by the United States in 2011, but he still remains as a symbol of a pure Muslim state and represents what many other extremists believe in. Now let's move to Bin Laden's organization, Al-Qaeda. Called after the base in Arabic, it was formed by Osama bin Laden in 1988. It began as a logistical network to support Muslims fighting against the Soviet Union during the Afghan War. Their principal aim today is to inspire and incite Islamic movements to attack those viewed as the enemies of Islam, which in most cases turned out to be Westerners. They also claim to be avenging wrongs committed by Christians and Jews against Muslims over the ages. They seek to unite all Muslim states by force if necessary under a single Islamic state. They also want to drive Americans and other non-Muslims from Islam's Holy Land. Al-Qaeda gets their support from people who see the US military action in the Middle East as a war against Islam itself. It has declared holy war on the United States, the Jews, and their allies, and is blamed for thousands of deaths around the world. Experts say it is linked to radical groups worldwide, like in Algeria, Central Asia, Kashmir, the Philippines, and across the Middle East.
Which are the consequences today?
As fighting continued between Taliban and government forces in Afghanistan in 2016 to 2017, millions of civilians were killed and injured in insurance suicide and IED attacks. The Taliban claimed responsibility for many of these, but groups affiliating themselves with the Islamic State, also known as ISIS, claimed several particular deadly attacks in Kabul. The Afghan government continued to expand its use of illegal militaries, some of which were responsible for killing and assaulting on civilians. Afghan National Security Forces were responsible for civilian casualties and indiscriminate aerial and mortal attacks. Both the Taliban and ANSF increasingly used schools for military purposes. Such abuses, along with insecurity throughout the country, deprived many children, particularly girls, of access to education. Hundreds of thousands of Afghans became newly internally displaced, including many returned refugees and migrants. The year saw no progress in the government to implement a national action plan to stop torture.